Hello, I'm Roger Bisby from the Skill Builder channel, and today I'm going to be fitting a washlet WC. Now, if you don't know what a washlet WC is, then you've probably never been to Japan, because they're very common out there, and they're very common now in high-end hotels and all sorts of places, spas and so on, and they're being adopted by people in their homes now, increasingly so. And when I first came across them, obviously like a lot of people, I thought, well, a little bit strange, a little bit foreign, but actually once you've used them, you become a convert. This frame's designed for showers or bidet toilets. However, in this installation, we're going to be fitting a Toto washlet, which is the market leader worldwide. We've got a metre marked on the frame. We measured down 1 metre, that gives us the height. But it's 1 metre from the finished floor level. So if you think about that, you've got some board on the floor, you've got some adhesive, and then you've got your tile. So normally it's going to work out to about 130, but you can adjust that according to what floor covering you've got. Down here, these rubber pads stop the sound transmission into the floor. Now, although you get these frames in different heights, for the washlet WC, it is a 1.18 frame. The great thing about this is the way it's designed, really easy to fit, and if you set these brackets here, you can actually put a shelf straight across from the top of the frame to the back brackets without adding any kind of noggins or anything like that. So for me, it's a really versatile frame, and I like fitting it. The other thing that I find is really useful, because I've fitted other makes as well, is that they actually give you the choice of a bent connector there to go 90 degrees, so you can go out left or right or down through the floor, but you also get in the kit a straight connector, so you can go straight out through the wall. It means you're going to throw one part away. Well, you know, it saves you ordering it, saves you getting on the job and thinking, oh, I've got the wrong connector, and waiting a couple of days while the merchant gets it in. So for the sake of, you know, then wasting a bit of plastic, it really is a big advantage. Now, one thing about this connector is that if you're using it to go out through the left hand side, you can see that they've actually made it eccentric so that you don't foul the stud work whichever way you go, so you'll have to notch any stud work out, so that's fine. And it has got this adjustment to set it back, but it doesn't quite clear this bit of conduit. So what you do is you use a straight connector here, and then you put a 90 on there, standard 90 solvent weld, whatever you like, on there to take you out. So there's always a way to get around these things, but you just have to do a little bit of planning when you're doing your first fix. So the other thing that I must mention is that when the water goes through into the washlet and it's warmed up by an instantaneous heater that goes through, now that's fine, it's controlled so that you get the right temperature, but it's assuming that the water that's coming in is cold. Now, why wouldn't it be cold? You'd never connect it up to a hot supply. But what you sometimes find is that when people have put their plumbing in, they've run the cold pipe very close to a hot pipe. If you've got secondary return or something like that, you've got constant heat, or next to a central heating pipe, so that when that water comes in, this is fairly rare, but it does happen, when that water comes in, it's actually too hot to be heated up. In other words, the little sensor, the computer inside there goes, hang on a minute, this is too hot, I'm not going to heat this water up. When you put your pipework in, if there's any chance that it's going to be transferring, picking up heat from another pipe, just insulate that pipe to make sure that it stays at, you know, average cold temperatures. So another thing that concerns people sometimes if you're living in a hard water area is scale build up, because you've got that little instantaneous heater warming the water up. In actual fact, I'm going to be fitting a Toto onto this frame, and Toto is the brand leader, Japanese. It's a fantastic unit, and they have a very nifty little descaler device. You just put it in and it descales it. So it's a very simple bit of maintenance. You don't need to take anything apart. One other thing that I need to mention is that although I've said this is a very versatile frame that will fit many different washlets, if you're using one with an automatic flush, then you can't use this frame. You have to use a specific manufacturer's frame. And when you do that, it means you've got the automatic flush, but don't think that you can do away with the flush panel, because I've seen that where people have not used the flush panel. And of course, when you come to maintain the system, if you want to do any work on there, you can't get at it without going through this. So even with an automatic flush, still have the flush panel. So although we're not fitting an automatic flush on this particular unit, I will show you the frame so you can see the differences. So this is the Toto frame. You can tell it's quite similar to the Abacus frame with a couple of important changes, and it's designed to take this automatic flush. So in here you've got a solenoid lifting the cables up, and that does the flush, but you can also do the flush manually as well. In order to tell the flush when to operate, there's a sensor here that comes down inside this conduit, and that goes into the seat so that when you stand up, the WC automatically flushes. So other than that, it's very similar in as much as you thread this pipe up through there. You have to take the little nut off the end, which is easy enough, and it's very important when you do this and you connect up to the isolating valve that the isolating valve will actually go in both ways, but what we've got in here is a filter. So there's your clue. You put the filter towards the back, towards the supply end, and the lever must point back towards the wall, and the reason for that is if you do it the other way round, you can't operate the lever. That's just a point of reference for you. If you need to have an automatic flush, then this is the frame you have to fit. Now, very usefully, I think, they give you a template and they say please do use this template, and the reason they want you to use it is if you don't get these in the right position, you don't get these holes in the right position, when you go to fit the pan, it won't go on. So you can see that the holes exactly line up with one, our electricity supply, and also the sensor and the water connection, and obviously the outlet and the flush inlet there. So the great thing about the Abacus flush plates is they do fit on the Toto frame. So if you want a colour coordinated flush plate, and Abacus has got a huge range of those, then just buy the Abacus flush plate and it fits perfectly onto there, no problem at all. So that's the water supply in, the electricity supply in, and all I've got to do is put these bolts in now. We're ready to board up. So there's just one more thing we've got to do, and that's put the electricity supply in. We're going to put this to a 5 amp fuse spur outside the bathroom. Now sometimes people do that bit first and then they try and get this in and they realise they can't get the plug through the wall, so they cut the plug off and then they go and connect the Toto up with a Wago strip or something like that, but don't do that. Use the plug because it's IP protected and it's made for the job. The Hirschman connector is supplied in the washlet seat box, and I got my electrician to wire this one up for me yesterday so it was ready to go. The water supply's in, electricity supply's in, now we're going to fit the pan. Now normally I balance these pans on my knees when I'm putting them in, but this is quite clever. In Toto they give you a little pan support that's in the box. Now that means I can slip the electrical connection and the water connection in through the back of the pan.
So we need,
You've got an Allen key there to tighten them in. 20 millimeters from the tiles. Okay, so we need to cut it to the right length. So we measure in to the face of the tile, 85, and then we need to reduce it very, very slightly, because the last thing that we want is this pushing the plumbing out of place. So this steel rule will represent the wall. So from there, from the marker pen, all the way into the socket. So 85 is there, so I'm going to say 80. Give myself 5mm clearance on that. So that's that done. Now we need the flush pipe to do exactly the same thing. You'll notice on the back here there's a little red plastic insert. That is a restrictor. Do not take that out, because what that does is it stops the water coming in too fast into the pan. If it comes in too fast into the pan, as it spirals round the rim here, there is a chance if it's coming in too fast that it'll jump up over the edge. So that's 45 out from the pan. So I need to cut 88 off here, but what I actually cut off is slightly more, 91, 92, because I don't want to push that little stop that's inside there out of place, because if you do that you could have problems, it could break it off and you could get a leak. So always allow a little bit. We're only really interested in going past that O-ring to make the seal, so there's enough there. So if you just take off say 3mm from there, you'll be fine. So the reason that I cut that with a handsaw is because I get a nice square cut with it, and I know a lot of people cut them with hacksaws. Some people use a pipe cutter. I find the pipe cutter squashes it in a little bit too much, takes it out of round. So I like to do that, but it's important if you do use a handsaw like that, that you just take the burr off, because we don't want any rough edges on there. And that is inside as well as outside. Now when I'm cutting soil pipe, I like to use one that's a little bit blunt, because if the teeth are too sharp it does tend to jump about. So when the carpenter chucks the saw in a skip, that's when you fish them out and use them for cutting your plastic pipe. So in the pack here is a little bit of sponge, and that is impregnated with silicone. It doesn't look like it's doing very much at all, but I can assure you it's quite amazing. I'll just give that a little trial fit in there. That's nice, that's going in well. So I'm actually going to fit this on the back of the pan. I find that's an easier way to do it. That goes on, you don't need the silicone on the back of the pan because that sits in there quite snugly. This one similarly, to give it a taper so that it goes past that O-ring without dislodging it. A little bit of silicone on there. Yep, that's beautiful. So just push that in lovely. That's very nice. Now there is a possibility that when the flexi hose goes through, it runs up behind the casting here. So you have to make sure that when you pull that flexi hose through the hole, that it stays where you want it to stay. The best way, just get a bit of the packing banding strip there, tie it around there, and then when I poke it through there, it's going to stay where I want it. So that'll make sure that doesn't kink up. I've got the cable going through now. I've got the bolts in place, and what I do is I've got a spare Allen key. You get these with every kit, so after a while you do accumulate them, and if you put one in each grub screw, that helps locate the screws. That means you can just fiddle it if it's not quite sliding onto your bullets there. So with everything in place, we've got this nicely greased up on here. Essential that you maybe use a bit of extra silicone if you need to. Make sure there's no burrs on the end of those pipes. So everything is going to help us to make a successful docking. And that way down here, we know that our flex is through. There's no chance of us kinking it. So at this point, all I've got to do is tighten up on the wall, and it draws the pan nicely back. So putting these pans on can be a fiddle, but if you make sure everything's in place, all those measurements are done right, the frame is determining where those pipes go, and if you do that, it's a beautiful job. So once you get it level, just tighten it up. Eventually, once we're finished, I'll probably just run a little bead of silicone around there. It's solid as a rock. I'm happy with that. So at this point, we can treat this just like any other wall hung toilet. And that means that we've just fitted it. We need to check the flush connection, and we need to check the soil pipe connection. I need to connect up this isolating valve, because once I turn it on in the system, we'll have water coming out of here. So it's important when you fix this that that lever is pointing back towards the wall, because if you have it the other way around, you won't be able to turn it once it's housed in the little horseshoe. Turn the isolator on here a tiny bit just to feel the pressure. You can hear it filling the system. So at this point, we can flush the water through. So now that's running nice and clear, I'm going to take this hose pipe off here, this flexi hose. At this point I can make this connection, lever back to the wall, filter on the inlet side, quick flush. I'll do that a couple more times because I just like to make sure. And pop that back in now. So this is the horseshoe connector. This goes up underneath the pan, and into this we're going to put the pipe, and we're also going to put the electrical connection, which will then be protected inside that housing. So now we can go and get the washlet seat from the box and make those connections. So we just put a bit of water around that. So we need 21 millimeters. That's perfect. This is actually one of the best seat fixings that I've come across. You don't want too much sideways movement. They say that it takes 150 kilos without it twisting, so that is the seat capacity. So 150 kilos, I'm about 75 kilos, so that's a big person, isn't it? So this is where we fit the seat, and we're careful not to kink the hoses. This is the tether. It's just basically a piece of string to stop you straining the connections if you're lifting this up for cleaning. Feed it in with your fingers to the back. You can feel it going. Listen to this as a click. So if you ever need to get it out, you can just put a small screwdriver in there and unclick it, and it will come out. But if you do that, you must make sure that you've disconnected the electrics and the hose from below, otherwise you'll be yanking them out. So now the tether's in place, just pull it forward as much as you can on the tether, and that means that those two slides are locked into the base plate, and then push it back into position. You can hear it click, and that's it. That's it securely in place. There's the connector. Very important that you use this connector. So once that's in there, clip the lid back on. Cable goes round there, stop it straining, back across there. Now the next bit, we need this fibre washer, which they supply. In place, let's find that little connection there. We're not going to twist that hose around. We're not going to put any strain on anything there. We can give it a little test. We're watertight, no problems at all. This is why it was so important to put the lever the right way around, because you wouldn't be able to turn it once it had gone through the housing there. So you can see that's where it sits. The horseshoe. So actually I felt my way in there. I fixed it up, but I just wanted to show you what was involved, and the cameraman couldn't get under there, so we've just slid a mirror under there, and you can see exactly what's going on now. That screw is up into the bottom of the pan. It's holding that nicely in place. If you look here, you can actually get to the isolating valve perfectly well, and you will need to do that. Turn the water off when you clean the filter, which is on the side of a pan. Very important that you do that you turn the water off first. Don't try and unscrew that filter before the water's turned off, otherwise you can dislodge the O-ring. Okay, we've got power to it. That's the very first thing that you want to check out, that you've got power, you've got water, and now the wand is going in and out. That's showing that that's working, so we're all ready to go. So there's a great thing, there's actually a sensor in this seat, so it won't do anything until you put somebody on it. On the controls, we can have the male or the female, if you want the back wash or the front wash. You can see the symbol there. Now it's all ready to go, and you can't actually operate this without, there are two different ways of doing it. One has a sensor in the seat, but this one is feeling the weight of somebody sitting down on the seat. And once somebody sits down on the seat, it will sense that that person is there, and it can begin its sequence. So with the aid of the remote control or the buttons, we can just select what we want here, and we're going for the rear wash in this case. We've put this cover on here so that we don't get sprayed with water, but normally you wouldn't have this here, you'd have a person in place, but obviously filming it, we need the cover. So we begin the sequence, and it's all nicely warmed up, the seat's warmed up, the water's warmed up, and the wand comes out, and you can adjust that. You can get a movement on that wand, and you can increase the pressure on it. The wand will automatically clean anyway, and it's got a hygienic coating on it. Whatever you do, don't go using household cleaners on it. You don't need to do that. You can just clean it with a bit of water if you need to, but it should actually clean itself. And similarly, when you're cleaning the plastic and everything, you only need to use a wet cloth, a damp cloth on the plastic. You don't need to use household cleaners. They will damage the plastic, some of them anyway. And the other thing is bleach is a no-no, because what happens with bleach is that if you use bleach, the gases from the bleach will come up and they will turn the plastic yellow eventually. And I've been out to many bathrooms where people said, oh, my toilet seat's gone yellow. The reason is they put down this powerful concoction of bleach, the gases come up, they close the lid on the toilet, and then it just starts to degrade the plastic. So just take care with the instructions to do exactly what they say in terms of cleaning, and you'll be absolutely fine. So we can see here from the Toto brochure that there are various models available. So the one I fitted today is this washlet RG. So it shows you that on this model you've got a warm water nozzle, you've got a heated seat, you've got the deodorizer, you've got the e-water, which is specially treated water. It treats the water for the wand. You've got a pre-mist, which will just coat the pan in a little bit of water so that it helps provide a kind of non-stick function for it. We've got a decalcifying function, so that would get rid of some of the scale, and we've got a seamless toilet seat on it. Now that's the functions in the seat, if you like, in the washlet seat, but in the pan itself we've got this tornado flush, which is why it was very important for us to leave that red flush reducer in there, because otherwise it just goes around and it's too active. So you'll see that. I'll flush it in a minute and you can see what happens there. So with all that in mind, you can get different ones. You can get ones with dryers in them, and you can get one with an automatic flush mechanism in it. So we're going to complete this. I'll show you the servicing. We're going to do that as a separate video, and the link is now on the screen, because some people will just want to look at the servicing functions. But before we do that, we're going to fit the flush plate so we've got it fully operational. Absolutely beautiful.